Have you ever stopped to think, really think, about the oldest piece of literature you can imagine?
That's a good question.
Right. And not just something ancient, like a museum piece, but something that's still, well, alive. A knowledge source that shaped billions of lives for literally thousands of years.
It is fascinating, and there actually is something that fits that bill perfectly universally seen as humanity's earliest literature. We're talking about the Vedas.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. Our mission, really, is to give you a clear, kind of concise, but still captivating look at this huge pillar of human civilization.
Mm-hmm.
We want to unpack what Veda actually means, look at how these texts were kept safe with just astonishing accuracy,
It's quite incredible.
explore the sheer scope of what's in them, touch on the mystery of their age, which is a big one, and, get a clear map of how this massive library is organized.
Think of it as your shortcut, maybe. A way to get informed on something that touches philosophy, science, culture.
Without getting totally overwhelmed, we're hoping for some real aha moments for you.
Definitely. So to really get the Vedas, we should probably start with the name itself, Veda.
Okay.
It literally just means knowledge. Comes from a Sanskrit root, vid, meaning to know. Simple as that, really.
Just knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's not one book, right? You said it's a collection.
Thinking, not a single volume. It's this huge body of literature, a massive corpus developed over who knows how many centuries, and crucially passed down entirely by word of mouth.
Wow. Orally. An entire library, just spoken and heard.
Yeah.
It's hard to even picture. I've heard the term Shruti used with the Vedas. What's that about?
Shruti, yes, that's key. It means what is heard.
Okay.
And it highlights this unique transmission, purely oral. Knowledge heard, memorized perfectly, then spoken to the next generation. It's very different from Smriti.
Riti.
Yeah, Smriti refers to later texts. Things that were remembered, sure, but eventually composed and written down by specific human authors. The Vedas traditionally aren't seen that way.
How are they seen then?
As revealed scripture, not human-made. The idea is that ancient sages, the rishis, didn't write the hymns, the mantras. They perceived them. They saw or heard this sacred knowledge and then became its faithful transmitters. They were like perfect receivers, not authors in our sense.
Revealed, not created. That's
Yeah.
a fundamental difference. So with that kind of origin, how do people define the Vedas? Are there, formal definitions?
There are a couple of really good rules. The famous commentator Sayana gave a purpose-based definition.
Okay.
He said, essentially, the scripture, which describes the divine method for obtaining what is desirable and for giving up what is undesirable, is called Veda. So it's a guide.
A guide to living well in a divine sense.
Exactly. And then there's a definition based more on the form from the sage Apastamba. He said Veda is the name given to the mantras and the brahmanas.
Mantras and brahmanas, what are those?
The mantras are the hymns, the verses themselves that's usually seen as the core. The brahmanas are later prose texts explaining the rituals connected to the mantras.
Got it. So definitions based on purpose, divine guidance, and form the hymns and explanations. But the overall feeling is it's something profound.
Absolutely. Veda generally points to the highest sacred, eternal, and divine knowledge, and of course, the texts that hold that knowledge.
And holding that knowledge.
Oh.
You mentioned preservation. How well were they actually preserved?
That's perhaps the most astonishing part. Think about it. The oldest literature we have, yet it's claimed they're preserved in their pure and original form.
No changes. No bits added or lost over thousands of years. That sounds almost impossible.
It does. It's been called the only unadulterated treasure house of true knowledge. It's an extraordinary claim, especially for something transmitted orally for so long.
How could that even work? Without printing, without digital files? How do you keep something that vast perfectly intact just by people remembering it? What does that say about how much they valued it?
It says everything about its perceived value. And it definitely challenges our modern ideas about information storage. Even Max Muller, a major European scholar who studied them deeply.
He admitted, quote, "The Vedic text was handed down with such accuracy and care that there is hardly any change in the words, or there is any uncertain aspect. High praise, considering."
So how did they do it? What were these ingenious systems you mentioned?
Well, the Vedic seers developed these incredibly sophisticated, multi-layered methods. It was all about checks and balances built into the very way the texts were recited and memorized.
Like error checking.
Exactly. Local error checking. For instance, the Vedic mantras have accents, swara, specific pitches. These aren't just for melody. They help preserve the exact word, construction, and meaning. Lose the accent, You might change the word.
Okay, so accents are one layer. What else?
Then you have different ways of reciting called pathas. The basic one is Samhita patha, just reciting the text as it flows naturally.
Right.
But then there's Padapatha, where you recite each word individually, breaking all the connections. Ka,
Go like that.
to isolate every single word.
Precisely. And Kramapatha, where you link them in pairs. Kaka, kaga, gaga, and so on. Step by step. These are the 3 Prakriti pathas, the natural ones.
Okay, that's already pretty detailed, but there's more.
Oh, yes. Then come the Vikritis. 8 complex artificial patterns of recitation designed purely for memorization and cross-checking. They weave the words forwards, backwards, skip words, repeat them in intricate sequences.
Wow.
The most famous is Ganapatha. It's described as the most difficult and the longest. It involves incredibly complex permutations. It's like a vocal MC Escher drawing, ensuring every syllable is locked in place.
That level of dedication,
Yeah.
it's mind-boggling. And there were other tools, too.
Yes, things called anukramanis. These were indexes, basically. Treatises listing the Rishi seer, Devata deity, and Chandas meter for every single hymn.
Chandas meter, how does that help?
A meter dictates the exact number of syllables allowed in a line or verse. If a syllable goes missing or an extra one creeps in, the meter breaks. It's another built-in check against losing or adding content.
Incredible. It's like layers upon layers of protection. No wonder A.A. MacDonald wrote what you mentioned earlier.
In history of Sanskrit literature, yeah.
Since that remote time, the text of the Vedas has suffered no change whatsoever, with such a care that history has nothing to compare with. That really drives it home.
It absolutely does. And this incredible care, this preservation, it loops right back to that idea of aparshyata.
The not human-created idea.
Exactly, because they believed it wasn't just some human text, but divine eternal wisdom, only visualized by the ancient seers. It had to be preserved perfectly. It wasn't like other books, Parushya books, written by known human authors.
Right. And you said the texts themselves talk about this.
Yes, the Rigveda itself refers to the Veda as eternal. And later texts, the Upanishads, use this beautiful analogy. They say the Vedas are like the Nishvasa, the very breath of Brahman, the ultimate reality.
Breathed out by God, essentially.
Yeah.
So eternal like God itself.
That's the concept. And you can see why, with that kind of status, the Vedas became the absolute root of Hindu religion and culture. Worship, rituals, philosophy, social attitudes. The influence is still deeply felt today.
And it wasn't just spiritual stuff, you said. It covered worldly knowledge, too.
Oh, hugely. It wasn't only about the highest spiritual knowledge, what they call Patvidya. It also contained a vast amount of Aparavidya.
Apavidya, meaning.
Worldly knowledge. Practical stuff. We find discussions that touch on sciences, medicine, political science, psychology, farming, even poetry, art, music. It's encyclopedic.
So it's not just a religious text in the narrow sense.
Not at all. There's an old text, the Yajnavalkya Smriti, that lists 14 sources of knowledge considered important back then. And right at the top are the 4 Vedas, and there's 6 auxiliary sciences, the Vedangas. That shows how central and comprehensive they were seen to be.
14 sources. Wow. And the language itself, I read somewhere, it has an extreme economy of expression. What's that like?
It means it's incredibly compact. Often, a few words can carry layers of meaning, deep hidden meanings, which is why, there's this long, long tradition of commentaries, scholars, ancient and modern, trying to unpack it all.
So it invites interpretation.
Deeply. It's seen as this wellspring of integral wisdom, science, tradition, and culture. Some call it the very fountainhead of human civilization.
Okay, fountainhead. That brings us back to age. You said the Rigveda is considered the oldest document. But nailing down when, that's the problem.
It is the problem. Hugely difficult. Maybe unsolvable isn't too strong a word.
Why so hard? What are the main roadblocks?
Well, several things. First, there's basically no external evidence from that period, no inscriptions, no seals directly related to the composition time. Second, the Vedas themselves don't mention dates. Third, that whole doctrine of aparshyata, if it's eternal, dating its composition is tricky. Fourth, there are astronomical references in the texts, but interpreting them precisely is highly debated. And finally, you have a pretty significant gap between how traditional Indian scholars view the timeline versus many Western scholars.
3 differences.
Oh, yeah. Max Muller, again, in one of his books, basically threw up his hands. He said something like, whether the Vedic hymns were composed in 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 or 3,000 year BC, no power on earth could ever fix.
He just admitted defeat on dating it precisely.
Pretty much. So when we talk about the age of the Vedas, what scholars are really trying to figure out is the period when the main texts, especially the Samhitas, were likely arranged and formalized into the shape we know, not necessarily when the underlying knowledge first appeared, especially if you accept the eternal view.
Okay, so it's about the compilation period. Is there any kind of anchor point? A latest possible date?
There is one widely accepted benchmark. It's an inscription found in Turkey at Bogoskoy.
Bogoskoy, okay.
Dates to about 1400 BC. And it mentions treaties between kings invoking 4 deities whose names are clearly Vedic: Mitra, Varuna, Indra, Nasatya.
Ah, so Vedic gods were known outside India by 1400 BC, meaning the Vedas, or at least that part of the Rigveda, must be older than that.
Exactly. That gives us a sort of terminus antequem where it has to be older than 1400 BC. But how much older? That's where it gets wild.
How wild? Give me some examples.
Okay, so you have someone like Balgangadhar Tilak, an Indian scholar, who looked at astronomical descriptions, like positions of constellations mentioned in the texts, and calculated dates way back around 6000 BC based on precession. Then you have traditional views, like Swami Dayananda Saraswati, who said they date from the very beginning of creation.
Beginning of creation, okay. That's
Very. But then contrast that with Max Muller. Based on linguistic development and links to later Buddhist texts, he proposed a much later date, around 1200 BC for the Rigveda Samhita.
Wow, 6000 BC versus 1200 BC. That's not just a small disagreement.
Not at all. And there are many other scholars with dates scattered all in between. It just shows the huge range of opinion and, frankly, the lack of definitive proof. It remains a puzzle.
A major puzzle. Okay, so we have this immense, ancient, mysteriously dated body of work. How is it all organized? If someone wanted to navigate it, what's the structure?
Good question. Broadly, you can think of Vedic literature, the Atharvaveda, or worldly knowledge side in 2 main chunks.
Right.
The Vedas themselves and then the Vedangas.
Okay, the Vedas. That means the 4 main ones we hear about.
Exactly. Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharvaveda. That's why we usually say Vedas, plural.
Got it. 4 core Vedas.
Now, each of those 4 Vedas isn't just one thing. Each one is further divided into 4 types or classes of literature.
4 parts within each Veda.
Okay.
Yep.
First, you have the Samhitas. These are the core collections of hymns and mantras, the actual verses.
The oldest part, generally.
Generally considered the oldest layer, yes. Then come the Brahmanas. These are prose texts, sort of commentaries that explain the meaning and performance of the rituals connected to the Samhita hymns.
Okay, hymns, then explanations. What's next?
Third are the Aralikas, often called forest treatises. These tend to be more philosophical, more mystical interpretations of the rituals, often intended for hermits or those in later stages of life.
Forest treatises.
Yeah.
Interesting. And the 4th?
The Upanishads. These are the really philosophical texts focusing on deep spiritual knowledge, the nature of reality, the self, Brahman. This is where a lot of core Hindi philosophy comes from.
Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads. 4 layers for each of the 4 Vedas. Although I've heard sometimes the Aranyakas and Upanishads are grouped differently.
That's true. Sometimes they're seen as concluding parts of the Brahmanas or even embedded within them, or the Samhitas. The lines can be a bit fluid, but generally those are the 4 recognized classes.
Okay, that maps out the main Vedas. What about the other category you mentioned, the Vedangas?
Right, the Vedangas. The word means limbs of the Veda.
Limbs.
Yeah, think of them as 6 auxiliary sciences or disciplines that were considered essential for properly understanding, reciting, and applying the Vedas. You couldn't really engage with the Vedas correctly without them.
6 essential tools. What are they?
Okay, there's Shiksha, the science of phonetics, ensuring perfect pronunciation of the mantras, crucial for oral tradition.
Makes sense.
Then Kalpa, which deals with the procedures for rituals, how to actually perform the ceremonies described.
Right.
Vyakarana, that's grammar. Understanding the structure of the complex Vedic Sanskrit.
Okay.
Nirukta etymology, the study of word origins and meanings, especially obscure Vedic words. Chanda meter, we talked about that with preservation, understanding the poetic meters.
Yep.
And finally, Jyotisha, astronomy and astrology, needed for calculating the right times for rituals.
Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana, Nirukta, Chanda, Jyotisha. 6 limbs for understanding the body of the Vedas. That's quite a system.
It really is. It shows how seriously they took the whole enterprise. And there's even one more layer, sort of.
Go on.
The Upavedas. These are considered secondary Vedas, or applied knowledge branches associated with each main Veda.
Applied knowledge. Like what?
Well, for the Rigveda, the Upaveda is Ayurveda, the traditional science of medicine and life.
Ayurveda. Okay, I know that.
For the Yajurveda, it's Dhanurveda, the science of archery and warfare.
Interesting.
The Samaveda, which is heavily focused on chanting, has Atharvaveda, the art and science of music and dance.
Fitting.
And the Atharvaveda, which contains a lot of diverse material, is sometimes associated with Arthashastra principles of statecraft, economics, and politics.
Wow. So each Veda has this whole ecosystem around it. Hymns, explanations, philosophy, supporting sciences, and even applied knowledge.
It's a remarkably comprehensive structure, and the ultimate practical goal in ancient times for much of this,
What was it?
performing yajna. Rituals, sacrifices, that was the central activity. These were broadly divided into Havir Yajna, simpler offerings like grains, milk, butter, and the more complex Soma Yajna involving the sacred Soma plant. The Vedas provided the blueprint for all of it.
Connecting the human world to the divine through ritual, using this vast body of knowledge.
That was the idea. It tied everything together.
So, looking back on our dive today, we've covered quite a bit. We started with the word Veda itself, knowledge. Then that incredible story of preservation,
Truly remarkable.
how they kept it pure for millennia. We touched on the sheer scope of spiritual and worldly wisdom, grappled with that tricky question of age,
The great puzzle.
and finally mapped out the classification, the 4 Vedas, their 4 parts, the 6 Vedangas, even the Upavedas. We wanted to give you those key nuggets, a real handle on one of humanity's oldest and most influential knowledge systems.
And it's not just history, its relevance really does continue. As the fountainhead, its ripples are still felt in philosophy, culture, science. It keeps informing new perspectives.
Yeah, and that leads to a really interesting thought to maybe leave you with. We heard that people today are trying to explore Vedic wisdom, but through the lenses of modern scientific knowledge.
Right, in fields like medicine, math, astronomy, architecture, even things like metallurgy or aeronautics mentioned in some interpretations.
So what does that actually mean? When you take millennial insights and examine them with today's science, is it about validation, reinterpretation? Could there be genuine scientific knowledge hidden in there, waiting for us to understand it in a new way?
It's a fascinating prospect, isn't it? What happens when ancient intuition meets modern investigation? What kind of aha moments might still be waiting inside these texts that have already journeyed through so much time? Makes you wonder.